MC Laubscher here, the host of the Cashflow Ninja podcast and also the president and chief wealth and investment strategist of Producers Wealth, where we help our clients integrate cash flow banking, also known as infinite banking, with their business and investments. If you're interested in learning more about how we create strategies that integrate cash flow banking and investments to turbocharge them, you can access a video series at yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com.
Welcome to the Cashflow Ninja, the podcast sharing how to create income streams and manage, multiply, and protect your wealth in the new economy. Here is your host inside the dojo, MC Laubscher.
Hello, Cashflow Ninjas. MC Laubscher here, and welcome to another episode of the Cashflow Ninja. I have a great show for you today, and in today's show, we're going to discuss and talk about, yes, a big surprise, the 401k. I'm joined in today's episode by the father and the creator of the 401k, Ted Benna. Ted Benna was working for an insurance firm outside Philadelphia about 40 years ago when he figured out how to use an obscure provision of the 1978 tax law, Section 401k, and turned it into an employee retirement account for contributions from both employees and employers. He designed it as a fringe benefit for banks that wanted to save taxes when they transferred bonuses to employees. In years since, however, it's grown into much, much more, and it's now the dominant way that Americans save for retirement, helping them collectively to amass trillions. Today, he's proud that his invention has helped millions of people prepare for retirement, but the plain-spoken fellow Pennsylvanian now shares that the accounts have a really, really ugly side to it as well, primarily that they have made mutual fund companies and investment managers extremely rich off the fees that just grew way too high. So he is now on a crusade to design simpler plans with lower fees that put money in the pockets of the future retirees, not just the money managers and financial institutions. Ted is commonly referred to as the father of the 401k because he created and gained IRS approval of the first 401k savings plan. He has received many citations for his accomplishments, including the 2001 National Jefferson Award recipient for greatest public service by Private Citizen, 2001 Player of the Year selected by Defined Contribution News, one of 8 individuals selected by Money Magazine for its special 20th anniversary issue Hall of Fame, selected by Business Insurance as one of the 4 people of the century, and one of 10 selected by Mutual Fund Market News for its special 10th anniversary issue Legends in Our Own Time, and Lifetime Achievement Award by Defined Contribution News in 2005. Ted Benna will share why the 401k was never really intended to fund a full retirement for people, but was only one component to it, and that the current form and structure of the 401k needs a complete makeover. Ted is also, of course, a business owner and real estate investor, 2 vehicles in which he creates and receives income from. Now, as you know, I am so not a proponent of the 401k. In fact, I'm a very, very big critic of the 401k. I don't regard it as a savings vehicle. It's actually an investment vehicle if you look at the definition of savings and investing. You don't have any control over your own money. I've also referred to it as putting your money basically in a straitjacket. It's very high in fees, as Ted has pointed out, and it defers taxes 30 to 40 years into the future. And defers really just means postpone, right? But also, as you know, as listeners of the Cashflow Ninja, this is not an echo chamber just of ideas and investments that I support. But this is a platform to share many different ideas and investments to help educate my audience. So I really enjoyed my conversation with Ted Benna. He brings a great perspective to this vehicle, and he shares a wealth of knowledge and also his experience.
Are you an investor looking for passive cash flow but don't have the time to explore your options? Discover real estate. It's the best option for passive income that savvy investors have been turning to for years to generate income and build wealth. But the reality is, real estate investing takes expertise, market knowledge, and time. So what do you do if you don't have the time or market knowledge? Discover how many business investors have found a way to generate cash flow from real estate investing. Their secret? They partner with proven private real estate investment funds. Four Peaks Capital Partners have created a system that allows accredited investors the opportunity to invest in undervalued assets to generate passive income and capital gains. Invest with the cash flow experts and sit back while Four Peaks does all the work. Call Four Peaks Capital Partners at 877-5-INCOME. That's 877-5-INCOME, or go to privateincomeinvesting.com. An offer to buy or sell securities is only made by a private placement memorandum. Prospective investors must read the PPM in its entirety before making an investment decision.
Ted, welcome to the show.
Thank you, MC. It's a pleasure being with you today. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, great to have you on. Now, before we get started, could you please share a little bit about your background and journey with my listeners?
Yeah, well, first, I grew up on a dairy farm in south central Pennsylvania, and I migrated there. My wife and I got married at a young age. We settled in Philadelphia, and as many well-planned careers go, MC, I answered an ad in the newspaper for a math clerk, and that was my strong area. The ad happened to be for the home office of then Provident Mutual Life Insurance Company in Philadelphia, and it was in their pension area, and that's what got me started into the retirement field. And I started as an actuarial grunt there, and then moved to plan administration, and left from there and joined two guys up in Newtown, Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia suburbs. We started a consulting business from scratch, built it to about 250 people, and sold it in 1990.
Wow. So very interesting that in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, because and especially Newtown, because that's where I reside. So, no pre-conversation. This was quite funny because I've met so many people and have quite a number of folks on my show. To hear and interview someone actually from Newtown, Pennsylvania is quite amazing. This is only the second time. So we have a very, very big world out there. So you've touched on a couple of things here. And of course, the big topic is that we wanted to get in today is 401ks, obviously being one of the discoverers of this. What was the process like? What were some of the things that played into that, and how did you come across this? How did you come across something that you saw, and how did you come up with this concept?
MC, there's myth and reality. The myth, which has been appeared in some publications, certainly not as a quote from me, by the way, was that I was quietly reading the Internal Revenue Code and found this buried little paragraph. And that definitely is a myth. The reality is this little section of the IRS code was added via legislation 40 years ago in the fall of 1987. And it was only a page and a half long. And one of the most interesting things about this, MC, is that politically is a fluke. It was, never intended to be, the mainstream of saving for retirement in America as it is today. And, that history is on my website, and, it's also in the new book I have coming out right now. But, what I was involved in doing was utilizing this section of the code to come up with a design that was totally different than what was intended. And the creative pieces I brought to it was adding a matching employer contribution, and employee pre-tax contributions. And, linking those to a section that, there wasn't anything there saying thou shalt not. So I chose to take the more aggressive interpretation. And, ultimately that design was supported by, Treasury when they issued regulations.
Very, very interesting. Now, for listeners listening out there, 1974 ERISA was enacted. What's it, 1978, you had the tax reform, and you mentioned 1987. So what was the process like? Did you have to go and talk to, obviously, the government folks in Treasury of what you were planning to do? What was the process in getting this through and setting it up? Because as you mentioned, you took an aggressive stance, and then the regulations came out. What happened around this within this entire process?
There's a lot. So let me just maybe take a few key points. The first thing was that when I presented this idea to Ed Johnson, who was my senior partner, his immediate reaction was, well, if this is legal, why haven't the top tax attorneys and the big consulting firms come up with it? And the only answer I could give him was, hey, I don't know. So being a cautious businessman, he suggested we get some legal support for it. And so we went to one of the major Philadelphia law firms and, got an affirmation that, this definitely had possibilities. Then we had an interesting thing happen. Ronald Reagan got elected as president, and one of his cabinet members was a client of ours. So we went to Washington and met with him, and he directed us over to the Treasury Department. The cabinet member was Drew Lewis. He happened to be Secretary of Transportation. And so we got over to the Treasury folks, and during that time, I had the opportunity to talk with the guy who was writing the regulations, and I couldn't get any input from him as to what the regulations may include, but he understood what we were doing and the approach we were taking. And I didn't have much reservation about the matching employer contribution being a problem because MC, there were already what were known as thrift and savings plans, which most of the major companies in the country had in place. And so there was that precedent. The piece that was more difficult was the ability for employees to do pre-tax contributions. And the legal process for that's a kind of strange one. And you actually see it written up in some of the early articles about 401k. They said, how would you like to take a salary reduction? Because when you sign up for 401k, that's legally what you actually do is you authorize your employer to reduce your salary and to make that contribution to the plan as an employer contribution. And we had some good dialogue with the guy doing the regs about that, and he understood the issues. But hey, until the regs came out and proposed for them 6 months or so later, MC, we had to anxiously wait, to see how they were going to react.
It's quite remarkable, and I think a good topic for us to look at too, just before we dive into more of this, is also just to maybe touch on the defined benefits system and plan versus a defined contribution plan, which this is kind of changed out to, because at that stage you had the defined benefits plans available. Was a lot of the cracks appearing in, especially the corporate pensions, on the wall that a lot of people move to this? What are some of the reasons that you've identified, or that you can speculate on, that this took off and just became this behemoth and beast to what it's grown into?
I've often been asked whether I expected it to be as large as it is, and I knew right away it was going to be a big thing. And The first reason is the fact that most of the Fortune 500 companies had, in addition to their traditional pension plans, what were known as thrift and savings plans. Those plans have been in existence for many years. And the way they work is employees put their money in after tax. They got a matching contribution. And, I knew when we got the attention of senior executives to make them aware of the fact that there's a possibility of putting the $20,000 or $30,000 a year they were putting in after tax to do that pre-tax, that it would certainly have a high level of interest, and that's clearly what happened. So the first big blush, MC, was large employers converting or adding that additional feature to plans that were already in existence. Now, another huge segment of the market, is there are over 500,000 401ks, and as we know, there are only 100 Fortune 500 companies, 500, so most of the plans out there cover small businesses. Over 90% of them have less than 100 participants. And, in those instances, this was an opportunity for them, to provide a meaningful retirement plan. And most of them never had or never would have had traditional pension plans.
Interesting. Now, what were some of the benefits already for the 401k when this was established and up? What were some of the things that you spoke about and the benefits that you have identified for this?
The number one benefit actually is the fact that it converts spenders from savers. There are very few of us, including me, when I was younger, who are able to save paycheck by paycheck, 6% or more of our pay, and keep our grubby hands off of it and not use it for other reasons. And so the fact that, it takes place kind of semi-automatically and as painlessly as possible off the top of your paycheck is what has helped millions of employees accumulate, between 10 and $15 trillion in these plans. The employer matching contribution is certainly a very key feature, and employees who have that opportunity available and don't take maximum advantage of it, they're just losing out. And and then the tax break, is the third benefit. You get a tax break from the government to help you save for retirement. And for lower wage earners, by the way, there's actually a tax credit, which doesn't get a lot of publicity, but you can actually get a credit from the government for saving in these plans if you're a lower wage earner.
Right. I think one of the things, and obviously, full disclosure, we are not very big fans of it, and we generate wealth in different ways through cash flow investments, which I know you do as well, through other vehicles such as real estate. But one of the things that I will definitely say and agree with you on, that it does bring in that saving habit, right? The habit of not just spending everything that comes into your personal economy, and especially for folks that are the have that spender mentality. It's kind of forced savings, which that is definitely a benefit of that. You've mentioned that it's a good vehicle for middle income Americans, but I would say high income earners don't really benefit as much from this as the middle income earners, and as you now mentioned, even the lower income earners. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the high wage earners and senior executives in big companies. I mean, the amount they can put into 401ks is pretty meaningless. When you're dealing with senior execs in major companies, their primary wealth accumulation is through qualified stock options and getting big payoffs that way, and then also through various non-qualified retirement plans that companies set up for senior execs. I mean, my old company, did a ton of that, business back in the day. And so 401k just doesn't give them enough. And then picking up on something you commented on, MC, 401k was never by any means intended to provide sufficient level of retirement income. I mean, as I mentioned, it's kind of a fluke thing. And so, all this agonizing over, are you going to have enough to retire? Definitely most people need to look at alternatives. And, investment real estate certainly is one, and, other ways of generating streams of income.
This is coming from the father of the 401k, so it's very, very powerful that you mentioned that, because that's one of the things that we've discussed and shared as well, that this was never designed, because I've read a lot of the articles that you've written on this too, and some of the interviews that you've done in other media publications, that you've come out and said, like, listen, this was not the end all and be all that it's perpetrated to be, or made to be. This was just one supplemental way to have savings, have an employer match, which you've mentioned was also actually, which resulted in a salary reduction, but you do get a savings in there. And then there's other ways to add on to this. The one thing that I want to touch on is, it looks like the intent of it too, again, when you started, was completely different to what it grew into with right now, because I think someone else grabbed a hold of the wheel of this vehicle, and that ties into kind of the Wall Street mentality and the fees that are involved with this. And I know that you've spoken to this and about this as well, that it's just it's quite insane, the amount of fees that this is charged. A lot of companies and so forth. Any comments on that?
Yeah, definitely. The fees in many instances are, they're quite excessive. There are responsible employers who run their plans and, do an excellent job of providing lower cost alternatives. But, particularly in the smaller market, too often, even the owners are pretty clueless about the amount of fees that they're paying and the alternatives that are available. And that, I just don't get it, MC. I mean, I know that the primary reason it happens is they're usually dealing with someone that they've had a personal business relationship with, that they trust, and they pretty much blindly, buy the product that they have. And, the unfortunate thing about that is, the owner and other senior people are the ones who have the biggest balance in these plans. So they're the ones who are taking the biggest hit on the excessive fees, and that expense is being paid from their tax-deferred retirement accounts. It would be a heck of a lot more efficient for, the business to pay, these non-direct investment fees, use lower cost investments, and the business get a tax deduction, for those expenses.
And the other thing that just doing a little bit of research in it too, initially the plan was pretty simple, right? It's something that you can explain very easily. The options and selections was very limited. I think there was, you can elaborate more on that, but it was very, very simplistic is I guess what I'm trying to communicate. It didn't turn into this Rolodex of product peddling that we see today.
Here's how simple it was. You had 5 possible selections in the early plans, because there were only 2 options, and you split your money among them in 25% multiples. So there were only 5 possibilities, 100, 0, 75, 25, 50, 50, 75, 25. And so it took probably about a minute for me to explain the investments to participants. I would say, hey, look, you have a guaranteed fund, which existed in that day. And those typically, were paying a guaranteed 5-6% return. And then you had some type of equity fund. And the way I would explain it is, if you put your money in the fixed fund, you'll get your money back plus something. If you put it in the equity fund, you might get more, you might get less. It was that simple.
You're listening to Ted Benna on the Cashflow Ninja podcast. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Life settlement investments have allowed financial and banking institutions to not only buy their equity contractually, but also diversify their capital from any economic, market, and geopolitical risk. It's been part of the billion-dollar blueprint followed by institutional investors. And if you're an accredited investor, you can also now participate in this vehicle with enormous growth potential. You can watch an informational webinar presented by one of the premier organizations providing life settlement investments, Penumbra Solutions, at cashflowninja.com/life settlements. Blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies will not only disrupt money, but every industry on the planet. These new innovations and technologies will affect every area of your life in the future. The cryptocurrency course teaches you everything that you need to know about getting started and profiting with cryptocurrencies, and includes expert training from the top crypto experts in the world. You'll learn how to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrencies, how to safely store your crypto, how to become a sound investor, even if you're just a beginner, and how to apply blockchain technology to your business. You can watch a free crypto masterclass and grab the crypto course at cashflowninja.com/crypto course. You're listening to Ted Benna on the Cashflow Ninja podcast, and now back to our interview. It's quite remarkable, and I just see what's out there. What's out there right now? Oh my! From target dated funds where they can, supposedly accurately predict what you're going to need at what stage and allocate portfolios a certain way. It has really turned into this behemoth. Which when Wall Street took reins of this, let's talk a little bit about the tax environment too, because the fees, obviously, we know that's quite crazy. And when it comes to advisors and to folks that help you, Ted, I mean, the philosophy that I have too is, nobody in this world would mind paying for value too, right? If somebody provides a value of a service of it, then of course, and you want to have the best advisors. But it's almost like now that it's the same thing being sold over and over again, just reposition and remarket it a little bit differently, and there's not really any value transferred from a different person to a different person within the product. What would be some of your comments on that?
Well, I agree completely with you, and I've detailed in the book that the history of the fees and how we got to where we are, and the picture's not pretty by any means, and the financial community has taken the opportunity at different times along the way to capitalize on what was to their advantage rather than participants' advantages. And, that has resulted in layering fees on top of fees without adding any real value along the way. And, probably the best way I can kind of demonstrate maybe the inefficiency of this is there are over 500,000 plans, and most of them have a financial advisor that helps them build a fund menu, plan by plan. And those menus look pretty much the same as I mean, it's just, tweaking, there's not any real creativity in them. But, each time that happens, the advisors are being paid as if they're doing some original piece of work. It's very inefficient and unnecessarily expensive.
Absolutely. And the tax environment too at that stage, right, where if we look at if we just look at the balance sheet of the U.S. government when these plans were created, at that stage too, from a fiscal standpoint, it wasn't quite the environment that we are in today. So I can clearly see the argument for then in the 80s when you're looking at it and saying, listen, if we postpone taxes, you put your money into this account, it's growing tax-free, and then when it comes out, most likely would be in a lower or about the same, tax bracket. But the environment that we operate in today is not quite the same as we did in the 80s, looking at the $21 trillion in debt the U.S. government is.
That is definitely a true statement. And you give a little historical perspective. Tax Reform Act in get my year right, 85, I guess it was, Reagan's tax reform. The first version of that would have totally eliminated 401ks. And so we had a major battle, to keep it alive. And but what did happen was the maximum contribution got reduced from $30,000 a year to $7,500. Now it's creeped back up to somewhere around $18,000, currently, plus an additional amount if you're over, age 50. These kind of things always come into the spotlight when you talk tax reform, and it did during the current administration. Tax reform, I guess, about a year ago, the idea of Roth-sizing all 401k was getting some attention. Let's just eliminate the pre-tax and have it all, become Roth type contributions. And there's a pretty fast, hard pushback on that, and so that quieted down pretty quickly. But hey, any time, I spent quite a bit of time, around Washington, and any time they get into some serious discussion on how do we narrow this gap, the issue of, well, where can we find money without being a tax increase comes to the table. But I'll be real frank with you now. The biggest change I see now versus back when 401k started is there is no fiscal responsibility in Washington now. None.
Right. What is it, $1 trillion budget deficits that we're looking at? And I actually am doing some research for a project I'm working on, and I looked at online at usdebtclock.org, and I almost got a heart attack when I saw all of the entitlements and the unfunded liabilities. And I mean, this is real serious stuff from a tax perspective. So it's all about perspective and the time that you operate in. And as I mentioned, when it comes to taxes, I could clearly see the argument clearly at that stage. Who would have thought, just like maybe how you thought that this would grow into this beast that it did, the 401k, that the fiscal irresponsibility through the years, now 30 years later, we would be in the situation that we're in. So it's quite remarkable. The other thing I wanted to touch on quick is you had mentioned that we should just blow up the current format and way, shape, and form that 401ks are currently in, the current structure, and restart and restructure. Restarting and restructure, what are the things that you would change on it? And how do you see something like that actually efficiently serving the purpose that you crafted it to serve for people?
When I made that comment, I was actually talking about the investment structure, not 401k completely. That either through misunderstanding or otherwise played out as blowing up the whole thing. And that writer of that article.
It's sensational. It's sensational, right? It sells.
It went viral. It got a lot of attention.
Yeah, exactly. It's sensational. So that's somebody's going to click on that saying, Ted Benna, father of 401k, says blows it up.
Yeah. So really what I was talking about was what we discussed earlier, that the investment side of it had just gotten absolutely, completely out of control, too complex and expensive. And that there is an alternative available today, if we were starting from scratch. And you mentioned earlier target maturity funds. There are those and, other ways of providing portfolios that are pre-packaged or mixed for participants that don't require them to have to know about large cap, small cap value, international, et cetera, that, there's a prepackaged solution for them that potentially is viable. And so shortly before I'd done that interview, I'd taken a plan with about 100 million in assets and eliminated the menu that they had in place. And we put everybody into index target maturity funds, a total plan cost of around 0.20%. It's now down to about 0.15. Can't get much lower than that. And when you do that, about 90% of the participants stay with that pre-designed allocation model. Now, the plan also gave the participants who wanted to continue to make their own decisions the opportunity to do so by giving them a totally open mutual fund window where they had thousands of possibilities that, they could build it on their own if they wanted to. But, most participants prefer the easier solution.
Absolutely. Now, we've touched on, and you've mentioned how this was never designed to fully take care of everyone for your entire retirement, and you've personally invested in real estate and commercial real estate and so forth. Some of the wealth and of course you have your own business. So if we just look at the cash flow quadrant, as Robert Kiyosaki talks about, there's a lot on the right hand side as a business owner and investor that you've personally doing too. What are some of the other philosophical approaches and stuff that you've done within your own life to create wealth, Ted?
One of them I recommend any person who is nearing retirement is to, begin seriously thinking about that and, what it's going to look like. And clearly one of the things to take into consideration is where you're going to live. Now, in our situation, we did that in our late 50s, and we were in Bucks County, Newtown, when they were going to build $75 to $80 million of new schools. We already had high taxes, and none of our children had settled there. So we decided it was good time to kind of rethink, why stay in this higher cost living area, and so we decided to migrate to north central PA. We came from the country to begin with, so we basically returned to the country, close enough to the major centers, and there's a big rollback in living costs. When you do that, we downsized as far as our housing. When we made that move, so that's one thing to think about. Hey, additional income and income streams, one thing. The other is to examine the expense side of it. And, do you need to stay if you're in a higher cost area? Maybe think about relocating, but in addition, perhaps downsizing, and doing other things on the expense side.
Yeah, it's very important to, as you mentioned too, to be aware and cognizant of the changing environment, especially when it comes to taxes, and being mobile enough to make decisions in a rapidly changing environment, just not locally, but regionally and also globally. One of the things that I've observed from wealthy and successful folks is that they're always studying, they're always learning new things. What are you currently studying, Ted? And what are you currently learning? And what are some of the things that you're working on that excites you?
Well, getting this book out in the market, which will happen within the next week or two, obviously it's been a couple year process off and on. I drafted it couple of years ago, I kind of felt compelled to do that, and then left it sit. And then, a few months ago, probably close to 6 now, I felt the urge to get back in and revisit. And as I was doing that, I realized that it would be appropriate to change the title from the original working title I had, which was revisiting a book I had done earlier, Escaping the Coming Retirement Crisis, Revisited, changing the title in the direction of it a bit to 401k 40 years later. So that's been one thing. Another one that we haven't discussed at all is I put together a guide and got it out in the market last fall, RC, that is an effort to address the segment of the market, which is quite large in the U.S., of employees who do not have any retirement coverage. Many of them work for small businesses. And clearly a problem for small businesses are 401k are too complex, too costly, and have too much liability exposure. So what I've done in the guide, which I've titled Set Up Your Own 401k, with a subtitle of And Save a Lot of Money, is provided 3 designs that enable small employers to offer a program that will duplicate pretty much the benefits of 401k, including a matching employer contribution, do it on their own if they want to, without the cost, complexity, or liability exposure. So those are a couple things. And then around that, there are a lot of small businesses who are sold 401ks when clearly there are better alternatives for them if they're going to have a retirement plan. And so in addition to the guide, we're providing consulting services for small businesses who want to explore alternatives, to see what type of plan is right, and we'll help them do that for a pretty modest fee. And I still do speaking engagements, by the way, anytime somebody wants to engage me to do that.
Great. Now, a core message in our show is to leave our families, communities, and the world better than we found it by passing down a mindset, values, and principles to future generations, not just money. So if you cannot pass on any money to future generations, and we're only allowed to pass on 3 principles to them to build wealth and achieve happiness and success, what would they be?
My number one would be my faith. It's certainly the most important part of my life. And, I've been contacted at different times by somebody who says, hey, I want to come in and I want to visit with you. And one of them was a young gentleman who was interviewing folks who had achieved success, and he was trying to find out what made him tick. And I told him, I said, well, hey, I'll be glad to sit down and do an interview with you, but I want to tell you up front that it isn't money. So, you need to know that. Oh, no, that's what I'm trying to find out, what motivates people. I received an award that I went to New York City for a luncheon presentation a couple months ago. Investment News honored me with an Innovators Award 2017. And I was asked, to explain where my innovation comes from, and my answer was from prayer, from my God-given analytical ability, and my mathematical training. So those were the key things. And then next to that, MC is family. I have a great wife. We've been together for 57 years. 4 great children, their spouses, and 9 super grandchildren. So, those are the biggies.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. How can my listeners learn more about you? And you've mentioned a couple of projects and books. How can they stay informed of launches and releases and of all of the projects that you're involved with?
The primary way would be my website, which is www.benna401k. The book will be highlighted on there when it goes to market. It should be up on Amazon within the next couple of weeks. It's titled 401k 40 years later, and then the guide is offered on the website, for small employers.
Great. Ted, well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and providing so much value for my listeners. And just sharing a lot around the 401k that everybody knows about. It's almost a household name like Kleenex, these days, in WD-40. Appreciate you coming on.
Glad to be with you again, MC.
Are you having a hard time finding great investment properties? Unfortunately, the best deals are rarely found locally. Successful investing begins with the right properties in the right markets. Norada Real Estate provides everything you need to invest in the best deals across the United States. Our simple, proven system will help you create real wealth and passive monthly cash flow. Learn how to find the best deals by downloading your free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Passive Real Estate Investing at noradarealestate.com. That's NORADA realestate.com.
Thank you for joining me again on the Cashflow Ninja. Thank you for all your support. You rock. If you like what you hear and appreciate what we're trying to build here at the Cashflow Ninja, please subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes and share our show with family, friends, and your network. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can sign up for our newsletter at cashflowninja.com or text Cashflow Ninja to 44222. I'm also posting daily videos on Facebook and YouTube and will live stream weekly starting May 2018. To make sure you don't miss any of the live streams, please like and subscribe to my Facebook and YouTube platforms. I'm also dropping content on Instagram daily. Be sure to follow us on Instagram to get in on the action. I want to thank you for spending your most precious resource with me today, your time. That's our show for today. Until next time, live a life of passion and purpose on your terms. This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.